There is a version of you the world has never seen, not because it doesn't exist, but because you've kept it locked away, hidden behind politeness, behind performance, behind fear. You show people the version that gets applause, that feels safe, that fits into rooms without tension. But the real you, the dangerous one, the bold one, the called one, that version terrifies you. Because it doesn't seek validation, it doesn't shrink, it doesn't blend in. Jesus didn't come to make you acceptable. He came to make you alive. And real life starts where image ends. If anyone wants to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Matthew 16:24. That's not a poetic idea. That's a confrontation. Because the cross wasn't decoration, it was execution. Of fear, of ego, of pretending. The person you're afraid to be is probably the person you were born to become. But that version won't emerge while you're addicted to comfort. Growth always requires death. The death of the old self, the predictable self, the socially acceptable self. Jesus said, "Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit." John 12:24. You're clinging to what's killing your calling. You're watering the version of you that makes everyone else comfortable but keeps your soul starving. And deep down you know it. You feel the tension, the hunger, the ache to rise. But you keep delaying your becoming because you're still asking for permission to offend those who benefited from your silence. That ends now. You've spent your whole life editing yourself, shrinking in rooms that couldn't hold your truth, smiling when you were breaking, agreeing to things your spirit screamed against. You weren't born to be liked. You were born to be light. And light exposes. Light disrupts. That's why they preferred you small, predictable, palatable. But Jesus didn't die so you could be polite. He died so you could be dangerous, dangerous to darkness, to comfort, to compromise. But that version of you will never rise as long as you keep negotiating with fear. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of being too much. But listen closely. Being too much for small minds is confirmation, not condemnation. The people you're afraid of losing are the same ones holding the leash to your potential. And if you don't cut it now, you'll spend your life performing instead of becoming. They trained you to be acceptable, not authentic, to wear the right masks, say the right things, stay in line, don't speak too loud, don't move too fast. But Jesus never called the crowd, he called the courageous. And courage doesn't look like noise. It looks like a quiet refusal to stay what the world expects. The person you're afraid to be is bold enough to leave the system, to disappoint people, to burn the scripts, to say no when guilt says yes, to stand when shame says kneel. That version of you doesn't play safe, it plays surrendered. And surrender looks like loss to the world, but it's resurrection in disguise. You're not stuck, you're scared. And that's okay. But if you want to live, truly live, it starts by burying who you were told to be, not gently, but with finality. The world doesn't need another version of you molded by opinions. It needs the version forged in fire, the one that went through betrayal and didn't lose tenderness, that walked through isolation and still chose truth, that died to ego, applause, and validation. That version doesn't beg to be understood. It speaks what's real and walks away from anything fake. That version scares you because it's wild, uncontrollable, holy. And holiness isn't soft, it's disruptive. Jesus didn't fit the mold. They tried to kill him for that. Because every time you step into who you really are, you threaten the system. The unspoken agreements, the emotional contracts that said, stay like this so we don't have to change. But becoming will always cost you fitting in. And if it doesn't cost you anything, it's probably not becoming, it's branding. You say you want freedom. But are you ready for the solitude that comes with it? Real freedom doesn't look like everyone cheering. It looks like walking out of rooms where you were once the favorite. It's disappointing the people who depended on your dysfunction. It's being misunderstood by those who once celebrated your silence. Jesus didn't promise applause. He promised a cross. He didn't say, come and be accepted. He said, follow me. And following means leaving. leaving behind the roles, the facades, the expectations you were never meant to carry. You will lose people. You will lose comfort. You might even lose your old identity. But what you'll gain? Clarity, power, peace that doesn't beg to be validated. And that version of you, the one you buried under fear, that's the one hell is afraid of. The person you're afraid to be doesn't need applause to act, doesn't need a crowd to feel anchored. That version of you doesn't wait for permission. It follows conviction. But you've been trained to wait, to get one more sign, one more confirmation, one more nod from people who don't even understand your calling. You keep asking for clarity when you already have conviction. And Jesus? He didn't wait for people to believe in him. He moved in obedience while being doubted, rejected, betrayed. If you keep waiting for consensus, you'll miss your moment. The real you moves in the dark before the light catches up. The real you doesn't need safety. It needs surrender. Because what you fear most isn't failure. It's responsibility. The weight of finally stepping into who you were always meant to be. Comfort has a voice, and it's seductive. It tells you you're not ready. It tells you you need more healing, more approval, more time. But comfort is a liar dressed like wisdom. And every time you listen to it, you delay your resurrection. Jesus didn't rise when everything felt perfect. He rose when everything looked dead. And if you're waiting for perfect conditions, you'll die in preparation. The person you're afraid to be is waiting on the other side of your last excuse. And it's not a leap. It's a funeral. A burial of the fear-driven version of you. The one addicted to delay, to people-pleasing, to playing small. You don't need more healing. You need more courage. Courage to become what you've already glimpsed in your spirit. You've seen it. Now move like it's already yours. The real you isn't hidden behind trauma. It's hidden behind the version of you that survived it. That version was necessary. It protected you, helped you navigate the chaos. But survival is not the same as purpose. You can't fulfill your calling using tools designed for a battlefield that no longer exists. Jesus didn't come to make you safe. He came to make you whole. And wholeness requires surrendering even the identities you built in self-defense. The person you're afraid to be doesn't flinch at criticism, doesn't justify every boundary, doesn't apologize for their light. That version is not hardened. It's healed. It doesn't need to prove anything. It walks in truth even if the room grows quiet, even if the crowd walks away. Because when you're truly free, validation sounds like noise, and peace feels like fire. Becoming isn't about creating a new identity. It's about returning to the one God planted before the world distorted you. The enemy didn't attack your present. He attacked your potential. That's why you've always felt torn, conflicted, restless. It's not because something's wrong with you. It's because something powerful is buried beneath the image you were taught to maintain. Jesus didn't come to make you manageable. He came to ignite what the world tried to extinguish. The person you're afraid to be has been whispering to you since childhood. In the quiet, in the pain, in the flashes of clarity between distractions. But every time it rises, fear pulls the blanket of normalcy over your head. Not today. Today, you stop apologizing for the roar in your spirit. Today, you answer. There's a war between who you've been and who you're becoming, and every day, you choose a side. Not with your words, but with your silence, with your patterns, with who you continue to protect. And often the enemy isn't the voice that insults you, it's the one that comforts you into staying small. That voice that says, "It's okay, you're doing your best," when deep down, you know you're hiding. You know there's more. Jesus didn't call people who were qualified. He called the ones who were willing to leave everything, to burn the boats, to step into the unknown without a backup plan. That's what the real you is waiting for. Not more inspiration, more sacrifice. Because becoming isn't about addition, it's about subtraction. And what you're willing to let die determines how much you can truly live. You've convinced yourself that playing small is humility, but it's not. It's disobedience. You keep calling it modesty, when it's really fear dressed in spiritual language. Jesus didn't downplay his identity to keep others comfortable. He walked in full truth, even when it triggered the insecure, enraged the powerful, and confused the religious. Why? Because identity isn't a conversation. It's a declaration. And you don't get to negotiate with people who benefit from your confusion. The person you're afraid to be isn't arrogant. It's unapologetically clear. And clarity always creates tension. But tension is a sign you're stretching, a sign that you're leaving the world of approval and entering the realm of authority. That's where you belong, not in performance, but in presence. Not in safety, but in sovereignty. There is a cost to becoming. Not everyone will understand. Some will call you cold. Others will call you prideful. But Jesus was misunderstood. His entire ministry, not because he lacked love, but because he refused to shrink his mission to fit people's comfort. And you too will be called things you are not, simply because you're no longer what they knew. But here's the truth. Your calling doesn't require their comprehension. Your obedience isn't up for community vote. You've been trying to bring everyone with you, but destiny isn't democratic. It's personal, intimate, specific. And some of the people you're trying to carry weren't sent for where you're going. They're not enemies, but they are exits. And the longer you delay, the heavier they become. Not because they're bad, but because they no longer belong. The reason becoming feels like death is because it is. Death to the expectations of others. Death to the false identities you wore to survive. Death to the illusion that your calling won't cost you anything. Jesus said, "Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." Matthew 16:25. That isn't metaphor, it's a blueprint. You don't find your life by building it. You find it by surrendering everything that was built in fear. The person you're afraid to be is buried beneath layers of performance, fear, and people-pleasing. You don't need to invent that version. You need to uncover it, and it begins when you finally say, "I'm done playing a role, I'm ready to become the truth I've been avoiding." You've been told that peace means quietness, that purpose means popularity, that calling means being celebrated. But Jesus never promised any of that. In fact, he warned that following him would divide families, end friendships, and ignite conflict. Not because you seek it, but because truth exposes everything built on illusion, and the person you're afraid to be walks in truth like a torch, not to destroy but to illuminate. And light doesn't ask permission, it simply shines. You've dimmed yourself to keep the peace, but that peace is fake. It's the kind that keeps everyone comfortable and you spiritually dying. The real you will disrupt some rooms. But disruption is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of alignment. You were not sent to keep everyone calm. You were sent to stir what's been asleep. You don't need another sign. You don't need more time. You need to stop betraying your becoming to preserve relationships that only survive your silence. You were not designed to maintain. You were created to transform. And transformation is violent to anything fake. It burns through false agreements. It untangles old alliances, and sometimes it leaves you alone. But alone with God is safer than accepted by those who cannot handle who you're becoming. Jesus often withdrew, not to hide but to protect the process. So maybe your distance right now isn't rebellion. Maybe it's reverence. Maybe it's not you pulling away. It's heaven pulling you forward. And the version of you waiting on the other side? That's not a fantasy. That's your future knocking. Will you answer? You've labeled your boldness as rebellion, your silence as peace, your discomfort as failure. But what if your discomfort is actually confirmation? What if the friction you're feeling is heaven's way of telling you, you're too big for where you've been? Jesus didn't fit the systems of his day, not because he tried to be different, but because he embodied truth in a world allergic to it. The person you're afraid to be isn't trying to stand out. They just refuse to lie, refuse to hide, refuse to pretend. And when you stop pretending, people start projecting. They'll call you arrogant, call you selfish, call you ungrateful. Let them. Because when God is calling you up, Criticism is confirmation. Not everyone can follow. Not everyone should. You keep trying to protect people from the cost of your transformation. You soften your words. You downplay your vision. You pretend you're still the same. But Jesus never altered his identity to fit someone's comfort zone. He simply said, "Follow me," and left the choice in their hands. You cannot both evolve and stay familiar. At some point you must choose, comfort for them or alignment for you. The person you're afraid to be won't play both sides, won't water down truth to keep a room from getting tense. That version of you doesn't need to be mean, just clear. And clarity always costs something. It might cost you their opinion, their closeness, their praise. But it will return to you power, focus, and fire. The kind that turns calling into movement. You're not being called to become someone new. You're being called to stop lying about who you've always been. The mask you wear isn't just to protect you from the world. It's to protect the world from how powerful you really are. Because once you take it off, there's no going back. You won't fit in anymore. You won't be invited everywhere. But you'll finally breathe. Jesus didn't wear masks to survive religious scrutiny. He walked in full light even when that light became a threat. And that's what becoming really is. Becoming a threat. To darkness. To mediocrity. To systems that were built on your silence. And yes, it's scary. But it's scarier to live your whole life performing, only to die never having met the real you. The world doesn't need another version of you that blends in. It needs the version that burns, the one that doesn't make sense on paper, the one that carries fire in their voice, clarity in their eyes, and peace that makes people uncomfortable, the one that walks into rooms and shifts atmospheres without trying. That version doesn't need a stage to have impact. It doesn't need followers to feel whole. It walks with God, even if no one else walks with it. And that's why it scares you, because it doesn't depend on anything outside of heaven. But that's also why it's holy. You're not afraid of failure. You're afraid of freedom, because once you taste it, you can't unsee it. And once you step into it, you'll never go back to pretending again. At some point, you have to stop waiting for the world to affirm what God already confirmed. The version of you you're afraid to be doesn't wait for applause. It moves in obedience, even if the room grows silent. Even if the door slams shut, even if the familiar walks away. Jesus didn't gather the crowds by being agreeable. He did it by being true. And that truth divided, refined, exposed. You're trying to ascend without shedding. But ascension always demands separation. From who you used to be, from what you used to need, from the voices that used to define you. Becoming isn't comfortable. It's sacred. And the fear you feel? That's not weakness, it's a sign you're standing at the threshold of transformation. You can stay in the hallway of hesitation, or cross into the room you were born for. This isn't about becoming impressive, it's about becoming real. Stripped, whole, undeniable. The person you're afraid to be doesn't hustle for worth, doesn't shrink to fit, doesn't dilute to keep peace. They live by a different rhythm, one led by conviction, not convenience. And the moment you choose to embody that version, everything shifts. Not instantly, but undeniably. The doors that open, the clarity that floods in, the weight that lifts. It's not magic. It's alignment. You've spent so long trying to maintain an image that never fit your soul. But Jesus didn't call image bearers, he called cross carriers. And the cross will always crush anything fake. But what remains after the crushing is unshakable, pure, ready. You won't find your power in perfection. You'll find it in the death of pretense. The you that God created isn't polished, it's wild. It's dangerous, it's disruptive, and that's exactly why it's necessary. You've spent too long trying to sanitize your strength, trying to fit your fire into formulas. But Jesus didn't come to validate your image. He came to ignite your essence. And essence doesn't ask if it's too much, it simply exists. The person you're afraid to be is not a future fantasy. It's the buried reality beneath years of fear, filters, and false expectations. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. You are ready. And if it scares you, good. That means it's real. That means it's holy. That means it's time. The door is open, not to something new, but to something ancient, something divine, something already inside you. Jesus didn't call the perfect, he called the willing. And willingness is all heaven needs to set you on fire. So here's the invitation. Become the person you're afraid to be. Not tomorrow. Not when it's safe. Now. The world doesn't need another edited soul. It needs someone raw, awakened, unashamed. Someone who refuses to die a stranger to their own greatness. Someone who doesn't just believe in truth, but becomes it. This is your moment. Answer it.